Okay, I will get started here on the discussion of what's new in CADIQ 13. And to start it off, I wanted to talk a little bit about uh, process automation through PLM integration. And if you've seen presentations that I've given before, I kind of like to put up this slide here that talks about sort of a simplified, very simplified MBD process, where we start our activity in design with the CAD model and our CAD system and pass that data down to manufacturing and inspection. They'll do some activities with that model and generate the tool paths and inspection plans and go ahead and inspect the physical parts that are produced, right? And that's probably also you've seen and heard about this idea of a digital thread, right? That's the whole concept of reusing your CAD model throughout that whole process, and taking that basically that CAD design and reusing it through the entire value chain and downstream systems. So that really makes that the CAD models themselves are critically important. And if we like to say here at ITI that if you're going to be relying on your model pretty heavily for being reusing it throughout that digital thread, then you need to have a reliable model. And that's really where CADIQ fits in as model quality and validation checking tool. And there's three main use cases where CADIQ fits in. The first one is around 3D model-based quality checking, where we will identify any defects that exist in that 3D model that are going to cause problems downstream, and that's either defects with the PMI or the geometry itself. Then we have derivative model validation. So in most cases, you're not using your native CAD file throughout all of the downstream processes, and at some point there's going to be derivatives that get created, and we want to be able to make sure that those match the native source model and there isn't data that's changed inadvertently or lost somewhere along the way. And then the third use case is around revision comparison, where we'll take a Rev A maybe of your native CAD model and a Rev B and compare those against each other to confirm that the intended changes got incorporated the right way, and maybe also that there aren't any unintended changes that got in there somehow, and also be able to create some documentation maybe to support the engineering change notice. So CADIQ can support all of those three use cases and help to provide trust to your model and improve that reliability. And there's really sort of two methods where CADIQ can be implemented. And as we sort of hinted at a little bit in the poll, there's a desktop implementation where CADIQ gets installed on a workstation that's really sitting outside of your PLM environment. And to run CADIQ, you got to extract the models out of the PLM environment, run them in CADIQ, and then any results that you want to take and put back into the PLM. It's sort of a manual process of loading those back in, or at least updating PLM with the results. And that's a typical sort of starting point where customers go. But the ultimate goal is to get to what we call sort of a PLM-based server implementation. And that is where CADIQ is installed on a server that's within the PLM environment, is integrated in there. And this really enables more automation to the process where selection of models and staging and running the analysis can be done in an automated way. Results can be stored back into PLM again in an automated way, and it really sort of improves the the efficiency of the process, so that having everything be sort of integrated there into the PLM environment. So we are happy to say that we now have available a Windchill PLM integration for CADIQ. So for those customers that are using the PTC's Windchill PLM product, you can license the integration from us, and basically install that into the Windchill environment, and it would now enable CADIQ to be running in that PLM environment. So we're supporting all three of the validation use cases that were mentioned. CADIQ can be executed either driven by a workflow or through on-demand actions. There's got queue management and load balancing built in, and then some configurable management of the job results. So whether you want to store them as an attachment in the PLM system or link to them, stored somewhere outside of the PLM database, or even just attach them to a notification email. So the Windchill PLM integration is the first of several PLM integrations that we expect to be making. Close on the heels of the Windchill PLM integration would be Teamcenter. That's the next one that's close to being ready, and with other ones sort of in the roadmap as well. So if those customers that are either just getting started with CADIQ or let's say mature with the desktop implementation and want to be looking at this, reach out to us and we can talk to you about that, even if it's not Windchill or if you're on one of the other PLM systems. We can certainly give you the information about that and how to move forward with it. So not all of our customers, we do have customers that have a mature server-based CADIQ implementation, and that was a PLM integration that they built themselves. That's certainly a possibility as well. And really to support those customers, as well as the ITI built into integrations, as I mentioned, we provide a command line interface for CADIQ, and have done in CADIQ 13 a number of enhancements that you can see here on the slide, improving sort of the flexibility and stability of executing that, providing better status on the jobs being run, and error handling, and enhanced XML results report that I'll talk about a little bit later as well. So even if you're not using an ITI provided PLM integration, we do are always looking for opportunities to continue to improve the experience and the usability of CADIQ in that environment, through this command line interface. So the next topic here is around enhancing PMI validation for MBD models. So MBD is kind of the critical process that many of our customers are wanting to use CADIQ to support. And we have a big focus on improving CADIQ support for MBD. Here in CADIQ 13, we've got a handful of new annotation-based diagnostics, some that will check for geometric tolerance values, whether they're too large or too small beyond the thresholds that you configure. Well, a couple examples also is looking for leading zeros. That's just a sort of convention based upon whether you have inch or millimeter units. You should have the standards sort of define whether you need to have a leading zero before the decimal point or not. So those are the kinds of things that CADIQ can check as new diagnostics. And in the little red bubble here, you can see that as of CADIQ 13, we now have well over 100 individual diagnostics that look at PMI information. So it's pretty good coverage. We're always looking for ways to expand that by adding new diagnostics or enhancing existing diagnostics. And a couple of examples here, there's a diagnostic that has existed for a while. It's called untoleranced dimension, and this is where CADIQ would look for dimension in the model that's neither a basic dimension or a reference dimension, and it would flag it if it didn't have a displayed tolerance. There's a couple of sort of edge cases where, particularly if you have a min or a max specified, you could say, that's arguably including a tolerance. So in the past, those would be flagged, as you see in the image, that it would be flagged as untoleranced, even though in that case I have 7x radius 1.0 max. Now CADIQ has been updated the logic that if it sees there's a max or a min there, it's going to treat it as being toleranced and not flag it for this diagnostic. And similarly, some companies will create tabulated parts, and they'll sort of replace the dimension value with L, for instance, or A, or whatever that is, and they'll have a table somewhere that lists a number of different values for that L dimension. In the past, also those dimensions where the value was replaced by text would be flagged as untoleranced, and now there's some improved logic there to not flag those as well. So just a couple examples of some enhancements to existing diagnostics that we've done here along the way. And in addition to the actual diagnostics, we're also have done a bunch of work around improving and expanding support for let's say advanced capabilities or data structures that exist in whether it's the CAD system formats themselves or neutral formats like STEP and JT. So here we can see a few enhancements to the STEP interface to support part section views and ability to specify maybe save views that should be excluded from analysis. We've also got a number of enhancements to the CAD system interfaces, whether it's CATIA and SolidWorks, improvements to querying different fields out of the feature control frames, and NX and JT now support those tabular note annotations. That was kind of a new feature inside of NX and JT. And then we also now have added support that's new for CATIA V5 assembly PMI. So in the past, if you had CATIA V5, we did part level PMI, but we weren't supporting PMI at the assembly level. That's now supported. So along the lines of improving validation for MBD models, I wanted to specifically talk a little bit about things like required parameters and notes that may exist in models. So a number of our customers are in, maybe in the defense or government space, and particularly for those types of customers, there are very sort of specific statements that need to be included in those models, even as certain notes that need to be displayed, such as a data rights statement, ITAR notice, or classification notes, and even models do need to contain certain model parameters in there. And we've added a number of enhancements in CADIQ 13 to validate models that they're complying with those required notes and parameters that need to be in there as a standard. So the first thing is around checking for required notes. We've added 4 new diagnostics here to look for these notes and report on when they're not meeting the requirements. So the first one is just an information diagnostic called required note, and this is really just sort of positive confirmation that the required notes exist if they're found. So you would configure CADIQ to say I need to look for a classification note, a distribution note, export control note, and an ITAR note. And the ones that are found and displayed as information in this required note diagnostic. So here we can see we've got a classification, distribution, and export control notes. There's another diagnostic called missing required note, and that's the one that would report as a defect any of those notes that you're looking for that were not found. So in this case, the ITAR note was not found within the model, so that shows up as a defect that this model is missing its required note of the ITAR note. Then we have a couple diagnostics that will check certain criteria around those notes, whether it's displayed in at least one view of the model and also displayed with a flat to screen orientation. So many times that's not only do you need the note in the model, but it has to be displayed and visible at least one save view, and it has to be displayed with flat to screen text. So this diagnostic would report any of the notes that are found that don't meet those criteria. And then incorrect required note content will report any required notes where the content of the note doesn't match the specified text that's in the configuration. So here you could say, I need to know that I have an ITAR note, but that ITAR note needs to be, it needs to have some very specific text in it, right? It's not just enough to have a note that says ITAR note, but where the content you don't know. So you want to validate that the content matches correctly, and that's what this diagnostic will do. And all of these diagnostics are flexible in that you can search for the model notes either by the name of the note in the model, or if the name can kind of vary, you can search for maybe a keyword that would exist in the note text. So if you have a note that sometimes it could be ITAR underscore note or ITAR dash note or ITAR note, all one word without a space or a dash or anything. When the notes names are different, we could do a search based upon some sort of keyword. So these are pretty nice enhancements that I think a lot of our customers are happy to see. We've also made some enhancements around model parameter checking. So there's advanced matching capabilities in here that would include wildcards and other expressions. So the diagnostics undefined root node model tree property, that's sort of just a fancy way of saying parameter, or the incorrect model tree property, you can include some advanced like wildcards and everything to sort of search the model for those parameter names. If the parameter name isn't exact in the model, you can still sort of search for it that way. And then when you're validating parameters, sometimes the models will contain a long list of them. And when you're generating derivatives, sometimes you only want to know that like only these 10 important ones need to get into the derivative, and the other ones we don't really care about, or maybe even your publishing process deliberately skips some of them. So there's now the ability to sort of provide a whitelist or specified list of parameters that you want to validate that would just ignore any other ones. And that's loading parameter here called include model tree properties would provide that capability. So this is just some of the things that we've added here in CADIQ 13 to expand and provide better coverage for notes and parameters checking in the models. So one of the other enhancements is streamlined assembly validation. So typically when validating an assembly in CADIQ, there's two steps. The first step is analyzing the assembly at the assembly level, where we would look at the assembly level structure, essentially the model tree, what components exist in the subassembly structure and everything, and then analyze the sort of general size, shape, and position of those components to determine whether something, whether a part has moved or changed position or something like that. And then the second step is detailed validation of each component individually. So typically CADIQ assembly validation included, must always include both of those two steps. Now with this enhancement, we're now supporting doing the assembly level validation. That's basically just step one, without doing the detailed component level validation. That's step two. So, the benefit of doing this is you just get a lot faster runtime, as we're not generating and validating each component, individually at a very detailed level. And, in a lot of cases, as part of your sort of PLM release process and everything, the individual parts are also, validated separately at a part level anyway. So the detailed validation is sort of redundant. That step 2 is sort of redundant anyway. So if this is something that you're interested in doing, there are some default job templates that would do this structure-only validation. You can find them in the CADIQ installation location under the config folder, and there's called config ASM struct. So that just means it's assembly structure only, whether it's millimeter or inch job templates. So, that was kind of a nice enhancement. Really improves the throughput and shortens your job times and everything for assembly validation when you don't need to do detailed validation of each individual component. So one of the things that CADIQ also does is provide some pretty comprehensive reports, whether it's a 3D PDF report, and I'll talk here about a XML report as well. 3D PDF reports have been around for a long time. We are, always finding ways to improve those. Here in CADIQ 13, we've done a few things. Most recently, the diagnostic items are presented now in a indented list, where in previous older versions of CADIQ, you had a couple of pull-down menus here in the PDF report that you'd pull down and select whether you wanted PMI change or geometry change or attribute change. And then based upon that selection of that pull down, you'd get the list of diagnostics that were shown there. So, annotation dimension change, face area change, annotation parameter change. Then you'd have to hit a pull down menu to pick the diagnostic that you want, and then it would list the diagnostic items under each of those diagnostics. So you kind of had 2 levels of pull down menus to get to seeing the list of a list of diagnostics. So now what we've done is we've removed those pull down menus, and we're presenting everything in just an indented list. Now that, depending on the model that you're working on and how many how many changes may exist in that validation or how many defects would exist there, sometimes that list of items can get kind of long. So in that case, we're also providing some filters for these diagnostics, and there's basically 3 levels of filters based upon whether it's geometry related to PMI, or some sort of model properties or attributes. So now there's little buttons above the save view area where you can filter the diagnostic items based upon turning on and off those checkboxes. If you want to just see PMI related diagnostics, you can turn off geometry and properties, and it shortens the list, makes it a little bit easier to navigate the PDF report that way. So the XML results report is another output that CADIQ can generate. And up until CADIQ 12.3.0, this was something that you could automatically generate this XML report with the job run, either through a controller preference or a command line option. But there wasn't an option to sort of manually create it on demand by the user after the job has been completed. And the content was pretty limited. There was only 5 fields in there that you can see here, a summary field that was basically the result, the CADIQ version that was run, when the job was run, and then the highest level name and level number that was achieved by whatever diagnostics were found. So now, starting with CADIQ 12.3.1 and later, we have a couple of new menu options in the right mouse button menu in the controller. So I can create the XML report on demand if it wasn't automatically created by the job run. And I could also now access it to just view it in a text editor. I can view that XML report, through these commands just by right-clicking on any of the job tasks. But more importantly, what we've done with the XML report is we've expanded the content that's in there and provided a new sort of structure to that document. So the idea behind the XML report is that it's data that you'd want to be able to publish maybe into the PLM as an attribute. You want to know the result or the date that it was run or some other aspect of the analysis, and you want to extract that information and put it into the PLM as maybe an attribute. The XML report would be the tool that you want to use for that. And the XML report provides the ability to sort of extract all of this data and put it into a database if you want to perform analytics over, let's say a large number of jobs that have been run over time. So the information that we've added, we've sort of expanded it into three main sections. There's a job information, model information, and then summary results. So job information gives you a little bit additional details about the analysis job itself. So the date that it was run, the CADIQ version, and the build date. The job time, so how long the job took to execute, and the total number of tasks that were in there. So if you have a model with saved views, you'll get a number of different tasks for each of the saved views. So that's sort of a quick way to see how many tasks were in there. Model information, we would tell you the name of the model, the path of to the model that was analyzed, the file format, and the last date that model was modified. And this would be for each of the CAD models. So if you're doing a comparison where you have two, you'd have model one with the name, the path, file format, etc., and then you'd have a model two with that same information. And then we're also providing summary results. So you get an overall result of the job that's like a pass or fail, and the total number of hot or warm or info diagnostic items that were found across the entire job. So a quick way to see the overall job results, those could, like I said, be extracted and put into a database or put into PLM if you wanted. And then for each CAD model and level, we would indicate the level number, the level name, and the number of hot, warm, or info items that exist for each of those levels. So the levels are things like PMI change or versus a geometry change, or a PMI defect versus a geometry defect. So you can see the number of hots and warms according to each level for each of those CAD models. So it's a lot more information available to be utilized by our customers, however you want to do it, whether it's putting it into a database or publishing it as PLM. And we're planning to continue to expand this XML report as we move into the future. And really the last slide here I just want to wrap up with is sort of the hodgepodge of updates we've added to various CAD systems, neutral formats, third-party tools that we've done over the course of the last year from CADIQ 12 to CADIQ 13. So we've added CAD system formats of NX and SolidWorks, Inventor, and CATIA, up to the latest sort of new versions that are supported there. Creo 7 just being released recently, didn't quite make it into 13.00, but will probably come pretty soon after. And we also added a new QIF format support. So now we can validate QIF MBD models against the part geometry, PMI, and saved views that are in those models. So you can validate, QIF against the native in the same way that you'd maybe want to validate a step file against the native. As far as format upgrades, for sort of third-party formats, we've updated to the new Hoops Publish Exchange 2020 for our PRC interface. The ASIS and JT files have been updated to their new toolkits. We also did a number of security-related upgrades to third-party tools that are sort of baked into CADIQ. This is really wanting, and keeping in line with making sure that that CADIQ doesn't introduce any vulnerabilities into customer environment. Again, as we work with a lot of government and defense-related companies, they want to pretty much make sure that we're always on the latest version of these third-party tools and aren't introducing any security vulnerabilities to their environment. And with CADIQ 13, there's also some things that we've discontinued support for. So Windows 7, basically Microsoft said at the beginning of this year that Windows 7 was going off of support. So we're discontinued support of Windows 7 with CADIQ. And then, basically older versions of the CAD system formats here in CATIA, NX, SolidWorks, and Inventor, we've also discontinued support for those. So if you need to continue running one of these, you'll have to go to a slightly earlier version of CADIQ. All of this information about CAD format supports and what's supported and what isn't is found in the CADIQ product specification. We provide that document with every release of CADIQ, and it would be found in the CADIQ installation under the docs folder there, and it would tell you it's product specification doc, and you can then see the entire support matrix. So that takes us to the end of the presentation portion, and we can kind of open it up at this point for any questions. If you've had the opportunity to enter questions in the queue, we can attempt to answer those for the few minutes we got left.
Sounds great. So it looks like we do have a few questions here. Anybody else, feel free to send those through to the questions window, and we'll answer them as they come in. So the first question is, any plans to evaluate PMI for schematic software readability qualities? Semantic, I'm sorry.
Oh, so we do have a number of those, 100 or some odd PMI diagnostics that I mentioned earlier. And many of those are related to the semantic data that's in there. So that's certainly a critical component to doing it, doing the validation. We will check to make sure that, from a quality point of view, that the PMI is semantically defined correctly and well structured along those lines, and report any differences or areas that aren't semantic. And then even when you consider derivative validation, if you're validating a format that does include semantic PMI, like step AP242, QIF, for instance, or JT, then we're also validating that the semantic data passed through from the native file to the derivative file. So that's definitely included as part of what CADIQ does.
Awesome. So the next question is, the PDF report enhancements look great. If we customize PDF report templates, how do we update them with the new capabilities?
Right. So CADIQ provides PDF report templates. You can then take those and in Adobe Acrobat customize those if you wanted to add some maybe additional distribution statement or a logo or whatever, those kinds of things. If you've been working with ITI, helping you, we would help you to set up your CADIQ implementation and everything. In a lot of cases, we will maintain versions of your job templates and your configuration files and everything here at ITI, and we provide those to you with each new release as part of what we call a custom configuration hotfix. So if we're maintaining your PDF templates for you, then those should be automatically updated to the new capabilities. And when you get your CADIQ 13 release, which I should say is expected to go out today, you would get a custom config hotfix that includes the updated PDF templates, and you should be good to go. If you've updated the templates and you haven't provided them to us and we don't have a copy of them, then you should reach out to our support team and we can help you with getting those updated as well.
Okay, great. Is CADIQ integration with 3D Experience available?
That's not available today, and that's one of the ones that's on our roadmap to be working on. I don't have I can't really say when we expect that to be available. We're kind of in the stages of working through the partnership with Deso to get to the point of providing that integration and essentially the support of 3D Experience V6 models as well.
Okay. Is there any plan to support Teamcenter PLM system?
Yes. So we sort of deliberately kind of did the PLM integrations in sort of a sequential fashion. It just turned out that the first customers that were really anxious to do this with us were PTC Windchill customers, so that was kind of why that one got built first. But we have been working with some Teamcenter based customers, and we're close to having a Teamcenter integration available. If that is something that you're interested in, then definitely reach out to us, and we can talk about the details of that and see how we can get that moving for you.
Okay, great. And it looks like we have one more question. You mentioned QIF support. Can you describe that a little bit more?
Sure. So the QIF format is really intended for quality and inspection tools, and it has a lot of capabilities to do things like bills of characteristics and capture measurement data and measurement rules and all of those things. What we're doing for our QIF support at the moment is not so it's basically just validation of QIF model against a native CAD file for the geometry that's captured there, the PMI, make sure all the PMI and its semantics were transferred appropriately, and the saved views. So it's really the QIF MBD portion, but not any of the other QIF analysis reported or inspection reporting sections. And we also don't generate QIF models. We'll only just validate the ones that exist.
Okay, great. So it looks like that's all the questions that we have for today. I want to thank you all for joining us for our What's New in CADIQ 13 webinar. Please keep an eye out for an email from myself, including a link to rewatch this webinar. If you have any questions, please direct those to info@iti-global.com. Thank you, Raphael, for your time this morning, and we look forward to connecting with you guys shortly. Thank you.
Thank you.